So as we go through the process of completing the FAFSA, both myself, Alyssa Samuel of the Scholarship Fund of Alexandria, and also James Major of Northern Virginia Community College will be guiding you through this process. So first, we're just going to start with some general financial aid information from Mr. Major.
Thanks so much. So I'll start off this afternoon by talking about the different types of financial aid that you're applying for when you fill out a financial aid application. So grants and scholarships are types of free money that does not have to be repaid. Grants are usually need-based, so this will look at your income and your family size to see what type of grant money you can be eligible for. Scholarships usually come from individual applications that you can submit through your high school or perhaps the college you're attending, churches or local businesses that will often use information from this FAFSA application in order to determine eligibility. Work study is a type of financial aid that is a sponsored work program that enables students to earn money while working for their college. This is money essentially that works just like a part-time job. There will be a question on the FAFSA application that asks if you're interested in work study. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take a job during your first year in college, but at least gives you the option if you decide that this is something you want to pursue. And lastly, loans are borrowed money that must be repaid with interest. So the student would be eligible for a Stafford loan. And there's two types of Stafford loans that students could be offered: a subsidized loan or an unsubsidized loan. A subsidized loan is a loan that is subsidized by the government, meaning the government will pay the interest for you while you're in school as a student. Once you graduate, though, you do start accruing interest on that loan. An unsubsidized loan does start accruing interest right away. These loans would be in the name of the student, and the student would be responsible for paying this money back. There's also different types of loans that a parent or a student could take out. A PLUS loan is an additional loan that might be offered to parents. If the Stafford loan is not enough to cover the full tuition for a student, a parent can apply for a PLUS loan. A PLUS loan is a credit-based loan that a parent can apply for to take out additional funds to help pay for college. If a parent is wanting to apply for a PLUS loan, they would want to follow up with the college to go through this process. And in addition, there's also private loans that students can apply for. Private loans will usually go directly through the college or a bank and will have different interest loans and repayment options than a regular Stafford loan that a student could be eligible for. Again, loans will be offered to a student, but by applying for FAFSA, it doesn't mean you're necessarily definitely taking out a loan. You can always decline a loan if you feel it's something you don't need. So the application that we're going to fill out today is the FAFSA. It stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So typically, this will determine your eligibility for federal aid that comes from the government, state aid, so if you're going to an in-state college, and much of the aid that colleges have to distribute out for students, and also many private scholarships. So students can complete the FAFSA application as early as you can. A lot of this financial aid we'll talk about today is distributed on a first come, first served basis. That's why you want to make sure you're filling out as close as possible to October 1st. Once you submit the FAFSA application, it'll tell you what your expected family contribution is, or your EFC. The EFC is an index number that a financial aid staff will use to determine how much financial aid you're going to be eligible for at their college. The EFC number can go anywhere from 0 to 999,000. 0 means you'll be eligible for a maximum amount of need-based financial aid. So let's go ahead and get started with filling out the FAFSA application. So you're going to want to start by going back to your browser and bringing up FAFSA.gov, FAFSA. When you log on here, you're going to want to complete your 2022-2023 FAFSA application. Make sure you're getting the years right on that, as there is a different application you can fill out for last year. So make sure you're clicking 22-23 and selecting Start Here. When you log in, you're going to be asked to select a little bit about yourself, and you're going to select that you are the student and you're wanting to access the FAFSA form. So select that first option. And at this point, you can log in to continue. So you're going to want to use that FSA ID that you just created to log in. You'll use your FSA ID and your password to log into the application. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. If for some reason you have forgotten your password, remember you can click Forgot My Password to reset it. You can technically also use your email or your mobile phone number to log in instead of your username, as long as you verify that information. So once you've logged into the FAFSA, this disclaimer will pop up. You want to make sure you just read through this before continuing. Once you've read through everything, you can click on the Accept button. Once you're logged in, the next step is you're going to create a save key. A save key is for temporary use. It's for you or your parent to return and complete a specific part of the FAFSA if you can't finish it today. So if you only get halfway and need to come back at a later point, that's what this save key is for. Save key is a combination of only letters or numbers, no special characters for the save key. And remember, this is the 2022-2023 FAFSA application that we're completing. Once you create your save key, you'll see this introduction to the FAFSA screen here with many frequently asked questions. You can scroll down to the bottom of the screen and hit Continue. And some tips as we're going through this. You want to make sure you're saving your FAFSA each time you go on to a different page. At the very top of the screen, you'll see the button that says Save FAFSA Form. Try to click that periodically just to make sure you're not losing any progress that you're making. As you progress through the application, please note you can select the headings above to access previous sections if you do need to go back. So the next, sorry, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Samuel now.
So the next part of the application will be the student demographics. So you are actually logged into the FAFSA, and from using your FSA ID, most of your information will be preloaded into your application. So your social, first and last name, date of birth, all preloaded. If you have a middle name, you could add your middle initial as well. You will not be able to make any changes to your social security number. So once you have filled all of that information out, select Continue. Once again, your email address is going to be preloaded into the application. And this is the email address that you would have provided when creating your FSA ID. Again, here, it's a good idea to make sure that you list a personal email address rather than your ACPS email address. The reason being is that your ACPS email address expires after you graduate. Now, the last thing you'll need to do is enter in your personal cell phone number. So it's not going to be your parents, it's going to be your number. And then once you complete that, you're going to select Continue. So your mailing address will also be preloaded into your application. If there is a need to make any corrections, you can do so, but otherwise you're just going to select Continue. The next question is going to be about student residency and eligibility. So for you, it'll ask, have you lived in Virginia for at least 5 years? If the answer is yes, you're just going to select yes. However, if the answer is no, you'll be asked to provide your state of legal residence. It's also going to ask for the month and date that you became a legal resident. So on the same question, it's also going to ask you about your citizenship status. So the question is going to be, are you a US citizen? And you'll have 3 options. You're a US citizen or a US national. No, but I am an eligible non-citizen. Or no, I am not a citizen or eligible non-citizen. So breaking down what eligible non-citizen and neither a citizen nor eligible non-citizen mean. So an eligible non-citizen is someone who is not a citizen, but someone who is still eligible to complete the FAFSA. So this includes someone who is a permanent resident, someone who is who has an arrival departure record showing any of the designations: refugee, asylum granted, parolee, T visa holder, Cuban Haitian entrant. It also includes someone who is a resident of the Republic of Palau, the Republic of Marshall Islands, or the Federated States of Micronesia. And it also includes someone who is a Canadian-born Native American under the terms of a JV. So if you are a student who is neither a citizen nor eligible non-citizen, you will either have, you might have an F1 or F2 visa,
alien registration,
a J1 or J2 exchange visitor visa, a G series visa. You might be undocumented, and this applies if you, regardless of whether or not you have DACA status. Basically, any category that is not listed to the left, you will be considered neither citizen nor eligible non-citizen, and won't be eligible to receive financial aid. Now, if you are in this category, please know that there are still ways to fund your college application, college financial aid process. So once you complete the questions about residency, you'll be asked to provide information about your education. So the very first question will ask you what your high school completion status will be when you start college in the 2022-2023 school year. You're going to select high school diploma. The next question is asking you what college degree or certificate you plan to pursue in the same academic year, 2022-2023. So you'll either select first bachelor's or first associate's degree. And after making that selection, it will automatically state that the answer is no for the third question of will you have your first bachelor's degree before the 2022-2023 school year. The next question is what your college grade level will be when you begin college in the 22-23 school year. And you're going to select never attended college / first year. Please note that if you are a student who has taken AP or dual enrollment classes, this is still applicable. You're selecting never attended college / first year. And as Mr. Major said earlier, there is this question about, are you interested in being considered for work study? If you select yes, it's not obligating you to have a job on campus. All it is just opening yourself to an additional type of aid. Once all of these are selected, you're going to press continue. So next, you're going to be asked about next they're going to ask questions about your gender. So the question that's asked is, are you male or female? And here the terms male and female refer to students assigned sex at birth. So select the appropriate option, and then you're going to select continue. The next question is completely optional. They're asking you to list your driver's license number. You do not, regardless of whether you have a driver's license or if you do, it's not necessary to complete, but if you would like to add it, the number can be found towards the top of your license under the heading Customer Identifier. Once you finish with this section, select Continue. So the next question is one of several questions that you'll be asked to determine if you are an independent or dependent student. So they're asking you if you are a foster youth or if you have at any point in time been in the foster care system. The next two questions, the questions about your parents' highest level of education, are also completely optional. So if you do not know, or you just don't elect to share, it's not necessary to do so. You can select continue and move on. The next part of the application is going to be school selection. So here you are going to enter in Virginia, where it says state. And because the Department of Education is not up to date and does not include the Alexandria City High School, you are going to type in T.C. Williams in the high school name field. Please note that here it is T.C. There are no spaces between the T and the C. Once you type that in, you're going to select search, and the school should appear at the bottom. So once you see that T.C. Williams appears, you're going to select the school and then press continue in the bottom right. So here is the point where you are going to be listing the colleges that you plan to apply to. And this is actually how your schools will receive your financial aid information. So in order to go through with this process, it might be helpful to have a list of the schools you're applying to if you're not sure of each of those. So it's useful to pull up Naviance or Common App or anywhere else where this might be listed. So in order to list the schools here, there are 10 different, you can list up to 10 different schools at a time. And in order to do so, you'll want to both enter in the state of the college, the school that you plan to attend, as well as either the city or the school name. So you want to make sure that you're
Ms. Samuel,
Sure,
Ms. Samuel,
yes.
it's Rosie. I'm just interrupting for a second. There's a couple questions about if people don't know which colleges or universities their students going to right now, how do they handle that in the FAFSA?
Yeah, so if you don't know, but you have an idea of where you plan to apply to, you can list those schools. Most people, when they're filling out the FAFSA, are not really sure where they plan to apply to, but if you have any idea and you think, okay, I might apply here or there, you can just list those schools. And there are 10 spaces, so please feel free to list any school that you are interested in. One important thing to note is once you do know, let's say you decide, you go to a college visit and you decide, I really like James Madison, and that wasn't previously on your list, you can go back into your FAFSA and add a school to your list. So one important thing about this is you want to make sure that everything is spelled correctly. If you are applying to a school, sometimes it can be difficult finding it if you're not listing it correctly. So if you are applying to George Mason, if you list in George Mason College, it will not show up because you will need to list George Mason University. When you are listing your schools, you're going to list it under school name and then select the search button. Once you select the search button, your school should populate and you will select the checked box. And you can repeat that process for up to 10 schools. On your screen, you should see a running count of the number of schools that are listed. So if you notice here, it says 3 out of 10 schools selected. This will let you know, am I approaching that number 10 list? This section does take a while to fill out. So I'm just gonna pause for a little bit and give you guys some time to add all of these schools to your list. All right, so if you're ready to move forward, what you're gonna do is select continue. Once you do so, you will be directed to a screen that will list all of the schools that you have indicated on your FAFSA. So each school will be listed and you will need to list your preferred housing plan. So it'll give you the option of listing on campus, off campus, or with your parents. If you are not sure if you plan to live on or off campus next year, just list on campus. It will not hold you to that. It's just providing you with more opportunities. It can often be easier to switch from being on campus to off. Within this list, you do have the options to click add more schools if you figure out that there's an additional school that you're interested in including. Again, you can list up to 10 schools here, and you can remove a school if you decide that you don't want to include it in this submission. I will pause again to give students a little bit of time to complete this section. All right, so the next section is going to be dependency status. So here, they're going to be asking you to select your marital status. Now keep in mind, this is a question that is still where the student is answering it. So in most cases, the answer will be, I am single. Once you select the appropriate option, select continue. So next you will be asked if you have children who receive more than half of their support from you, who will receive more than half of support from you between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023. So if you are a student who is a parent and you are living at the house of a parent, a guardian, or relative, you would not be classified as providing more than half of the support, so you will select no. So you will only select yes if you are a student who has a child and you are providing the majority of their financial support, meaning more than half of their financial support. There's also another question about if you have additional dependents apart from your children who you provide more than half of their financial support for. So you will be asked to answer these additional dependency questions. So for most students, these answers won't apply and they'll select none of the above. But it's important to read carefully before proceeding forward. These questions will determine whether you are a dependent student, so a student who will list their parents on the FAFSA, or an independent student. Please note, there is a question here about if you have been in a legal guardianship. So just because you are living with someone just because you're living with your aunt or cousin does not mean that you are in a legal guardianship. A guardianship is a situation that must be determined by a court. So there's typically paperwork documenting that you are in a legal guardianship. If you are not sure of how to respond with these questions, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to provide you with further assistance on your individual situation. There is also a question about whether or not you are considered homeless. And it does ask if you were considered homeless on or after July 1st of 2021. So you may be considered homeless if you are living in a shelter, park, public space, camping grounds, cars, or abandoned buildings, or if you are temporarily living with other people because you have no other place to go. Now, please note, if you're in any of these situations and you are fleeing a parent who is abusive, you may still be considered homeless. Again, if you are not sure or if you're unclear of your status, please speak to me one-on-one and I'd be happy to provide clarity for you. So if you answered none of the above in the previous screen, you would be considered a dependent student. If you're a dependent student, in most cases, you will select, I will provide information about my parents. There are very few cases in which you would say, I am unable to provide information about my parents. So there are special circumstances in which you could do so, but please note that all of these criteria that I'm about to go through are situations that are not considered special circumstances. So it is not considered a special circumstance if you do not live with your parents. The expectation is that you should still be able to reach out to your parent and ask them to send documentation of their financial information. It is not considered a special circumstance if your parents do not provide you with financial support or they refuse to contribute towards your college expenses. It is not considered a special circumstance if your parents don't claim you as a dependent on their taxes or if they do not want to provide information on your FAFSA. And it is not considered a special situation if your parents are living in a foreign country, because the expectation is that you will indicate this on your FAFSA. And if indicate this on your FAFSA, and translate your parents' 2020 wages into US dollars. So if you are in a situation and you're not really sure how to provide information from your parents, what's best is to work with me and also contact the financial aid offices at the colleges you plan to apply to, just to ensure, just to make sure what their ruling is on your individual situation. So the next section is parent demographics.
Okay, do you want to take this back over? So
It's all
next,
yours.
yeah, so next we're going to determine first which parent to use on the FAFSA application. So all of the questions in this next section will be entered from the parent's point of view. So first it's going to ask about your parent's marital status. There's explanations under each of these sections where you can see if your parents are living together, married or unmarried, or if they're divorced or separated, or if you live with your parents equally and they're divorced or separated. You would click on this to expand to learn more about each marital situation. However, in this next section, you're going to be selecting what your parents' marital status is. There's several options that they'll give you. If parents have never been married, in which case you are to use the parent you have lived the most with in the last 12 months. If you didn't live with one parent more than the other, in that case, you should use the parent who has provided the most financial support to you in the last 12 months. If your parents are unmarried, but they are living together, you would use both of your parents on the FAFSA application. If your parents are married, then you would use both of your parents on the FAFSA application. If your parent is remarried after being widowed or divorced, so if your parent was separated or divorced and then became remarried, remarried would be the status you would choose, and you would use that parent and the step parent on the FAFSA application. If your parents are divorced and have not been remarried, then you would use the parent you've lived the most with in the last 12 months. And again, if you live with both parents an equal amount of time, then you would use the parent who's provided the most financial support to you. If your parent is widowed, you would just use your living parent. And also to note, a legal parent that can be used on your FAFSA can only be a biological or an adoptive parent. You would never be using a grandparent, a foster parent, legal guardian, brothers and sisters, or an aunt or an uncle, as these are not considered parents on the FAFSA application unless they have legally adopted you. So even if you're living with your grandparents, they would not be your parent on the FAFSA unless they have actually adopted you. For students whose parents have never married or separated or divorced, remember you use the parent who you have lived the most with in the last 12 months. This is referred to as the custodial parent. And if your custodial parent is remarried, you would use your custodial parent and your step parent on the FAFSA application. And then if your parents are unmarried, but they do live together, you would list both of your parents on the FAFSA application. So in this next section, you will select their marital status. If your parents are married, remarried, or divorced or separated, you would need to list the month and the year of their marriage or separation. Just the month and the year. Once you've entered that date in there, you can click on continue. And this is where parents' information would go. Parents do want to enter their information exactly how it would appear on their Social Security card, as far as their last name, first initial. Remember, if your parent does not have a social security number, they enter in all zeros. So even if your parent has a tax ID, you would not enter the tax ID in the FAFSA. You would still enter all zeros. Parents would also provide an email address that's separate from the student's email address. If you're entering both parents or a step parent, this is where parent number 2 would repeat that same process, entering in their social security number, last name, first initial, and their date of birth. Always make sure you look over this information to make sure it's correct, just to avoid any delays in processing your FAFSA application. According to the next question, you'll be answering if your students have lived in their current state for at least 5 years. If parents do live out of the country, there will be an option to select foreign country. They're not living in the States. If they have not lived in the state of Virginia for at least 5 years, they would be asked to list their state of residence and the month and the year they moved there. Next, they would ask some questions to determine your household size. First, they'll ask parents to indicate the amount of children they have. This would be children that they're currently financially supporting this upcoming year. You just have to put the number in the space provided. It will also ask how many other dependents your parents have. The example of this would be if you have a grandparent living in your home or a niece or an uncle that your parents are financially supporting. So in the first section is the amount of dependent children your parents have. The second field with the amount of other dependents that your parents have. Once you've indicated these numbers, you can click on continue. This will list your household size. The next question will want to know how many people in your household size will be in college this upcoming year. Note, your parents do not count in this number. So if your parents are in college, they would not be listed here as a number in college. You, the student, would count as one. And then if you have any brothers or sisters that are also going to be in college next year, they would also be listed here. So the total number of people in college would be listed in this section. Once you've figured out your household size and the number in college, the next section is going to be parent financials, where they'll look at tax and income information. So remember, the income that they're going to be looking at is income and tax information from 2020. They'll ask you 3 questions to determine your tax filing status and if you're able to use the IRS data retrieval tool. The first question they'll ask is if you did file a tax return for 2020. If you did not file a tax return, you can select not going to file. But if you have already filed your 2020 tax return, you would select already completed. Next, you would have to indicate what type of income tax return you completed. Normally, this would be a 1040 unless parents filed out of the country or live in a different country and did a foreign tax return, in which case they can indicate foreign tax return. The third question will ask what their tax filing status was: married, filing jointly, head of household. This can be found on the first page of their 1040 tax return near the top. They would indicate their tax filing status, and if eligible, they can click to use the IRS data retrieval tool and hit continue. Keep in mind, not everybody is eligible to use this IRS data retrieval tool. If you filed, or if your parents filed married filing separately, or if their marital status has changed within the last year, your parents might not be eligible to use this IRS data retrieval tool, which is okay. they can still manually enter in their information. However, if they are eligible, they'll see this box pop up that says your parent is eligible for the IRS DRT. They would want to click Proceed to IRS. And this is where a parent would use their FSA ID and their password to link to the IRS website and use this data retrieval tool. So once prompted, the parent would enter in their FSA ID and their password and hit continue to be taken to the IRS website. What this will do is it'll transfer in 80% of the tax information that it needs in order to complete the FAFSA application. So I'll give everyone a couple minutes just to make sure they can do this. Once you're taken to the IRS website, you will see that a lot of the parent information transfers over, such as name, address, social security number. What parent will need to do is to enter their address exactly how it appears on their 2020 tax return. So once you enter in the address, you can scroll down and try to submit to see if you can get the IRS data retrieval to work. Keep in mind, even if you've moved recently, you would still want to type in the address on your 2020 tax return if it has changed. That's how the IRS will create a match with their taxes to be able to pull over their information. So if it does work, you'll see the option to transfer in that tax information, in which case you would click the box that says transfer now, which will pull in the information. If it doesn't work, or if you get an error message, double check your address just to make sure you're typing it in exactly how it appears on the tax return. Even if it does match, we have noticed sometimes this just doesn't work. So if it's not working, you can just click Return to FAFSA, and you'll be able to manually enter your income and tax information. If the IRS data retrieval tool is successful, in the first question, you'll just see the words transferred from IRS. That means everything worked and your income information has transferred over from the IRS. If you're manually typing in the information, you'll see that there'll be a line telling you exactly where to look on your 1040 tax return to find the answer. The first question, what was your parents' adjusted gross income for 2020? This can be found on line 11 of your parents' 1040. If parents did not file taxes, because not everybody needs or has to file a tax return, they would just want to put in any income that they did earn by looking at their W-2 form, which will show their individual income. If parents are married, you would have to add together their total income. This is an example of what the IRS 1040 form looks like. And you'll see the lines are clearly listed here. And remember, the answer for that first question is located on line 11. Once you continue, the next question will ask about individual parent income from work. Now, this wouldn't transfer over from the IRS, even if the IRS data retrieval did work. So this is something that you would have to manually enter in. This is your parents' individual income. So this you can find from their W-2 forms. If your parent was self-employed or a driver, such as Lyft or Uber, you can find their individual income on their Schedule C or Schedule 1 form. So individual incomes would go there. You would click on continue. And the next question is going to ask about parents' income tax for 2020. Now, this isn't their total income. This is their income tax that was paid. This answer you can find on line 22. And you would subtract line 2 from your Schedule 2. If you have a Schedule 2, it'll be the 3rd or 4th page in your 1040 tax return. Not everyone has a Schedule 2 though. So if you don't have one, it's okay. you would just want to put the number that appears on line 22 of your 1040. If you do have a Schedule 2, just subtract the number that's on line 2 from the number that's on line 22. For the next section, it's going to ask some additional questions about any other benefits or income that parents did receive. So you want to read through these questions just to see if anything applies to you. If nothing does apply to you, you would simply enter 0. So I'll give everyone a couple minutes here just to look over these questions. The first question is in regards to combat pay, which would only be if parent was in active duty military. The second question about students' college or scholarships received would be if your parent was in school receiving a scholarship or a grant. Education credits, this can be found on Schedule 3, line 3 of your tax return. Again, if you don't have a Schedule 3, the answer would just be 0. Untaxed portions of IRA distributions or pensions, this information can be found by subtracting the figures listed there off your 1040. If you had any IRA deductions or payments to self-employed retirement plans, that information would need to be listed as well, which can be found on your Schedule 1. And if you don't have a Schedule 1, the answer, of course, would just be a 0. Next, it'll ask some additional questions about financial information. The first question is any child support your parents paid because of divorce or separation. Please note this is money that they paid, not money that they received, money that they paid. The next two questions ask about cooperative education or employment programs. These are need-based employment programs that your parent would know if they did have, such as federal work study or a fellowship or a censusship. And additionally, they will ask about untaxed income. This is a question where they will ask if there is child support received for children. So if parents were receiving child support for all children, this number would be listed here. This would be a yearly amount that they received in the year 2020. The next question will ask about any additional stipends received for housing, food, or living allowances. Please note, this does not include the value of on-base military housing. Payments to tax-deferred pension or retirement saving plans. This information can be found on your parents' W-2 form. So if your parents have a W-2, you would just look in the boxes listed D, E, F, G, and H. Keep in mind, the FAFSA does not ask about the net value of your retirement, but it does ask about payments made to your retirement plan during that tax year. That is what this question is in reference to. The next question will ask about veterans' non-education benefits. So if you're receiving disability death pension, that amount would be listed here. Or any additional untaxed income not reported, such as workers' compensation or disability benefits. That information would be listed here. And remember, that would be an annual amount for 2020. Now, not everybody will see this next screen. Sometimes the FAFSA application is able to waive certain questions for students and parents. So if you are asked about parent assets, you would see 3 additional questions. If you're asked to skip remaining questions, you would want to press yes and skip these questions. The first question will ask, as of today, what is your parents' total value of cash, savings, and checkings? Remember, this would be as of today, the current balance of all cash, savings in their checking account. The second question will ask the net worth of your parents' investments. This includes real estate, but not the value of your parents' home. Remember, this question also does not include 401k retirement plans. However, it would include any 529 plans. The third question will ask the net worth of parents' current business or investment farms. You do not include a family business with 100 or fewer full-time employees. And for the next section, we're basically repeating all the last questions for the parent financial information for the student. So this would be any income or tax information that the student had in the year 2020. So you'll see that the same three questions will appear for the student. If the student did file a tax return, the student could put already completed a tax return for 2020. However, if student did not file taxes this year, they simply select not going to file. If a student did file tax return, they would put in their tax filing status, and they would try the same method to use the IRS data retrieval tool that the parent used. And this would link their FAFSA to the IRS and pull in their 2020 tax information. So if the student is eligible, the student would follow the same steps, proceed to the IRS website. The student would not need to re-enter FSA ID and password since they're already logged in. They would have to enter their address exactly how it appears on their tax return for 2020. And if eligible, the student can transfer in their information using the IRS DRT. Now, as a student, if you did not file a tax return for 2020, but you did work, you can still input your income for 2020 in this first question. So a student would list any earnings they had in 2020 by looking at any W-2 they had from a job worked. If you had multiple jobs, you can just add up your W-2s together and enter that information there. Again, this is more questions about student earnings, which again, you can find from your W-2 form. And if a student did file taxes, they would ask them information in regards to their income tax paid. Now remember, this would only be a question that would appear if the student did file taxes. So if you did not, this would generally skip you right to the end. But income tax paid, remember, can be found on line 22 of your 1040. Student will receive some of these following questions, even if they did not file a tax return. Again, these will ask about any additional benefits that the student had or was using in the year 2020. If you weren't using any of these benefits or did not receive any money, you would simply put 0 next to the question that is asking. More than likely, a lot of these or all of these will be 0. And the same will go for the next section in regards to untaxed income. Remember, these are all being answered as the student. So read through these questions carefully. and just input 0 if this is money that you did not receive. The student would also potentially be asked the same asset questions as parent. They'll be shown a figure, and if the amount of your total assets exceeds that number, you would enter yes. So in this example, it's asking if your assets exceed $2,200. If as a student, you know you have more than this in the bank, you would indicate yes. Then you would have to answer the following questions. How much do you have total between cash, savings, and checkings in your bank as of today? As a student, if you have any investments, those investments would be listed here on this second field. And then again, if student owned a family business, that would be listed in the third field. If not, simply put 0. You will notice that I mentioned earlier, sometimes there's a waiver for certain questions. So if at any point you're asked if you want to skip to the end to avoid certain questions, the FAFSA has a simplified formula that can waive certain questions to determine you're eligible for a maximum amount of need-based financial aid. If a student is, sorry. And Samuel, I'll kick it back over to you.
And with that, you are almost done with the FAFSA. The next step is signing and submitting the FAFSA. So the first question you're going to be asked is, are you a paid preparer? The answer to that is going to be no. Being a paid preparer applies to people who are paying another individual to complete the FAFSA on their behalf. So once you select no, you're going to select continue. And you are going to be prompted to a long screen that will have all of the answers that you provided on the FAFSA. So what you want to do is review everything that is listed and make sure that it is accurate. If there are any inaccuracies, you can use the screen, the icons at the top of the screen, to go back and edit your FAFSA answers. But just make sure that everything listed is accurate before you go to sign and submit. And please note that if you have used the IRS data retrieval tool, either for yourself or your parent, rather than a number being listed, it's going to say transferred from the IRS. So because you have already listed your FSA ID, you will not need to enter in your username and password, but you will need to provide student signature in order to electronically sign the FAFSA. Once you indicate this, you'll be directed to an agreement of terms form. Once you scroll all the way down to the bottom and read the content before proceeding, you're going to check the box below and then select sign and submit FAFSA form. After you sign and submit, you are going to see this green icon indicating that your FSA ID was signed. What's next is for the parent to sign and submit. So if the parent has provided their FSA ID and username in the application already, they will have the option to provide parent signature, and they'll go through the same process that the student just did. However, if the parent has not yet provided their FSA ID, they'll be asked to provide their username and password. And here, in lieu of a username, they could also list their cell phone number or email address. We'll just need to put the correct information in order to sign the FAFSA form. And after which they'll select sign this FAFSA form. Please note that if you have listed 2 parents on the FAFSA, so your parents are married or remarried, you will need to indicate which parent is the one that has the FSA ID. So on your screen, it will have identifying information such as the date of birth, last name, the last 4 numbers of your social security number. Based on the information you will see, you are either going to select parent 1 or parent 2, and then select provide parent signature. After that parent signature is provided, again, they'll be asked to read through an agreement of terms, scroll down to the bottom, and your parent will select that checkbox before pressing continue. Now, if your parent is not able to electronically sign the FAFSA, and the reason that they wouldn't be able to sign the FAFSA would be due to not having a social security number, they must select other options to sign and submit. Once they do that, they will be prompted to a screen where they can download and save a form that's going to populate the relevant information. They will then need to print this form and manually sign the form. On that form, it will contain a mailing address that signature page needs to be sent to. Now, please note, if you need help with this, with any part of the process, whether it is printing the paper or sending off the letter, please get in touch with me and I can assist you with that. Again, my office is A115. Now, if you are mailing the letter and sending it through the mail, it does take longer for the signature to be processed because it's not electronic. However, if you are a student and you're planning on applying to NOVA and you have to complete the FSA, you have to use this manual signature option, please get in touch with me and I will be able to assist you in expediting the process. So once both of these student and parent sections are signed, say signed with FSA ID, you'll have the option to submit My FAFSA Now. After submitting your FAFSA, you'll see a screen that looks something like this. Now, it will have both your name on the screen. It'll have the option if you have a brother or sister who needs to complete a FAFSA, you can transfer a lot of the information from the FAFSA to their application. Your EFC, which is what Mr. Major mentioned earlier in the presentation, should also be listed here. And what also will be listed is the colleges that you've listed on the FAFSA and their graduation rates, their retention rates, meaning the number of students who remain at that school after their freshman year, and their transfer rates. So it's a lot of good information. Please note that after the FAFSA, it does take even though you received an email stating by now you've received an email stating that your FAFSA is complete, usually takes a few additional days for your FAFSA to be processed. So once your FAFSA is processed, that is when you are able to go back in to FAFSA.gov and you're able to review your student aid report, which will both list your EFC and all of the information that you listed on the FAFSA. You also have the ability to go back in and make edits to the FAFSA as needed. So if you realize that you listed something incorrectly after submitting, or if you had more than 10 colleges to list on the FAFSA, you can go back in to edit the FAFSA and make revisions. Please note that the FAFSA is an application for federal aid, but there might be additional financial aid applications that you might need to fill out. So the 2022-2023 Virginia TAG program is a program where it's a way for you to access financial aid if you are planning on attending a private college in the state of Virginia as a full-time student. Now, this is not available at the moment, but please stay in touch and we will keep you aware of when it will be available. Now, what is available is the 2022-2023 CSS profile. So this is an application that specific colleges and universities require, and these are often colleges and universities that want to know a little bit more about your financial circumstances because they can potentially offer a greater amount of institutional aid. So if you go on the CSS Profiles website, you will find a list of colleges that require the CSS profile. Please note, after the FAFSA, you will want to make sure to monitor your email messages and student portals to respond to any financial aid inquiries. Throughout the year, this is what financial aid offices and also college admissions offices will use to communicate with you. So it's really important that you monitor your emails. One way in which it might be important. So there is a process called verification in which colleges, the financial aid offices at colleges will request additional information just to prove that the information that you've listed on the FAFSA is correct. So this will not happen anytime soon, but it is really important to make sure that you are staying on top of your emails because that is how schools will communicate with you. So we mentioned scholarships as a form of financial aid. One really important scholarship that I want to highlight is a scholarship that is offered through the Scholarship Fund of Alexandria. So this scholarship the scholarship application will become available beginning November 1st. So this is only awarded to students in ACPS, Alexandria City Public Schools, who are graduating in June of 2020. So all students, if you meet that criteria and you have achieved a 2.0 GPA or above before the end of your junior year, you are eligible to apply. The great thing about this scholarship is that we offer a great deal of scholarships for students who have financial need. And with those scholarships, they are worth a minimum of $3,000 a year. So they're not just scholarships where you receive it 1 year and then it's done. You have the potential to earn a minimum of up to $3,000 a year, $12,000 over the course of 4 years. While the application is competitive, about half of the applicants receive a scholarship. So it is definitely worth applying. We also offer scholarships for students who do not demonstrate financial need. So please do not feel as though, please do not exclude yourself for applying from these scholarships. But these scholarships are typically scholarships that have more specialized criteria attached to them. In SFA's fundraising, we fundraise mainly for students who have financial need. And SFA is able to award over $1 million in scholarships each year. It's a very unique opportunity, so please take advantage of it when it becomes available. All right, so I am Ms. Samuel and I'm in office A115. And earlier you heard from my colleague, Ms. Kenny. We are here to help you with every step of the college application process. So we talked a lot about FAFSA, but we're also able to help you in working on your college list, going through college applications. We're here to read essays, help you brainstorm them, edit them, help you identify scholarships, and when the time comes, review financial aid award letters. So we are trained in college and financial aid processes, and we want to help you. Now, I do realize that you may not have been able to complete your FAFSA today. So if you need to finish your FAFSA or you have any additional questions, you can schedule an appointment with me by going to the link below. And I think the link has appeared in the chat. Just calendly.com/scholarship fund. You can book an appointment with me in person. If you are not at the King Street campus, or if you are at home at the moment, I'm also available for Zoom appointments. But please know, I am here, we are here to assist you in completing the FAFSA. With that said, I would like to thank everyone for participating in this activity, in this presentation, specifically the multiple NOVA financial aid counselors, both Mr. Major and also the 2 financial aid counselors who were in the breakout rooms. I'd also like to thank the Virginia College Advising Corps members and the member of ECMC who are available to answer students' questions on a more individual level. Thank you so much. Just gonna check to see if there are any additional questions in the chat. And it doesn't look like there are. So with that said, I am going to end this presentation.
Ms. Samuels.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes?